This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's Electric Cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin with what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former state senator and chair of the State Board of Education, Howard Lee, Becki Gray from the John Locke Foundation, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, and former legislator Connie Wilson. This past week, our Becki Gray, Howard Lee, Chris Fitzsimon, and I were honored to appear at the Watson College of Education at UNC Wilmington talking about higher education. We were joined there by Hannah Gage, a longtime member of the UNC Board of Governors, met a lot of loyal viewers, and enjoyed our discussion at one of the state's great universities. We enjoyed it. Well, this week's show promises to be interesting as we look down the NCAA barrel to repeal HB 2, talk about possible tax cuts planned in our legislature, and proposals to build new schools. And, of course, we'll ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Let's get started. Faced with an April 1 deadline by the NCAA regarding future sports playoff championship games in our state, there was a flurry of activity last week to repeal HB 2, some of it pretty bizarre. Late Tuesday afternoon, Senator Phil Berger and House Speaker Tim Moore called a press conference to announce a deal had been struck regarding a proposal made by Governor Cooper. The governor said he didn't know anything about it. Chaos ensued. The same occurred Wednesday and throughout the week as they stared down the barrel. Becki, the HB 2 issue has raged on since March 2016, and most everybody agrees it needs to go away. I think we can also agree that the political posturing and finger pointing is no way to run a state. Was it preordained we were just going to have to come down to the deadline to get some movement, or
The deadline from the NCAA's latest decision? I don't think so. Tom, these compromise proposals have been considered. 4, 5, 6 of these have been done for months. I think that the NCAA proposal may have some kind of factor in it, but to be honest with you, I think a lot of people, a little bit, but I think a lot of people really feel like they are tired of being bullied by outside forces and that sports ought not play a part in weaponizing some of these public policy issues.
Howard, you have worked over in the legislature for many years, both as a representative and as someone who did lobbying over there on behalf of the schools. We've gotten into a system now where the caucuses determine what's going to take place. It used to be the speaker could say, let's make this happen, and it all fell in place. But now the caucuses, and they're divided to the point where many say it reminds them, what's happened in this past session or two is reminding them of what took place a couple of weeks ago in Washington on the repeal and replace of Obamacare, when factions of the Republican House caucus actually killed the bill. Is that what's been going on with HB 2, or the factions within the caucuses what's holding this up?
Oh, I think there's no question about it. It is so discouraging to see that people are so divided, even within the caucuses, against each other. But let's face it, the legislature functions under a system of reacting to pressure. We do our budgets at the last moment. We meet all night to try to get a budget passed when time is running out. We stop the clock. We play all kinds of games not to go forth and make a decision. A lot of that, of course, is because they don't have the votes in place. And so I think we've at a point now where caucuses are being destructive to the process of legislating.
Connie, it was pretty crazy over there last week. There were meetings taking place, and they were calling sessions and pausing sessions, and all kinds of stuff taking place. This is sort of reminiscent of what happens at the end of session, isn't it?
Well, typically with the budget, that's actually what happens, and then as big bills are being negotiated and conference reports are coming forward and they wait for it. But I will tell you, I've never seen an issue like this where there's been so much time given by the caucuses in debating it. And this really is something that goes to the heart of what people believe are important, how their districts are different, and House members have a smaller district than Senate members. Senator Cooper has a different constituency that he listens to than probably the Republican caucuses do.
You mean Governor Cooper?
Sorry, apologies. Governor Cooper.
You've put him back in the legislature.
Yeah, and I used to play basketball with him, and that's why. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
That explains a lot.
And I was a bad basketball player too. But anyway, you've got those differences that are there at the core, and that's why there's this problem. And they're trying, but it's going to be extremely difficult because they don't have the same foundational beliefs.
While all this was going on, Chris, we got an Associated Press report that came out that estimated that the cost to our state would be $3.7 billion over the next 12 years. Lieutenant Governor Dan Forest, among others, said this is just fake news. They just made these numbers up. What do you think of these estimates?
I think that we say fake news anytime now we don't agree with something. I mean, the Associated Press is a reputable media organization. They defended their numbers. They were even interviewed by their numbers. And it really, if you think about it, over 10 or 12 years, 10 years, that's, $370-something million a year. We're already up to $600 million by almost everybody's account. It's only been 1 year. Credit Suisse said they want to bring 1,000 to 1,500 jobs to Wake County, averaging $100,000 an employee if the General Assembly repealed HB2. So I don't think it's an exaggeration at all. Now, you can argue economics shouldn't drive it, but economics is a big deal here. This whole thing could have been avoided a long time ago. And you mentioned the caucuses. If we would have had an up or down vote in June or July or August last summer on repealing HB2, I believe it would have passed or would have come close to passing. But all the Democrats would have voted for it and half the Republicans.
Well, that brings up a good question. I mean, Governor Cooper has said all along that there were enough votes if you added Democrats to Republicans in order to get the thing repealed. And yet, for some reason, the Speaker and the pro tem have said they're not going to put it on the floor if they don't get a majority of their caucus. Why is that, Connie?
Because a caucus is like a family. And it takes everybody pulling together to win races and also to raise money. It's extremely important that each member takes into account what the others need. And
but
that's
can
why
we
you're seeing
agree that it's sort of a dysfunctional family?
Well,
I guess most are.
But I would say this, on most issues, they can work stuff out. This is a hard one because it gets to those foundational issues.
Yeah, Becki, back to this business about the cost, the projected cost, $3.7 billion. Recent studies and economic projections indicate our state's growing pretty well and the economy is pretty healthy. Does that help substantiate Lieutenant Governor Forrest's claims that the effect of HB2 has been minimal on North Carolina?
Absolutely, and it's not just Dan Forrest's claims, it's the facts and the economic facts as you look at it. One thing that I think is flawed in those figures is that they projected out over 12 years. Well, that's making the assumption that HB2 will have the same impact in 12 years that it has today. Hopefully that's not going to happen. The other thing is when you consider that against our entire state budget, it is like, 1/10 of 1/10 of 1% of what our state budget. So is this having a big impact? No, it certainly isn't. I think the economic argument for this is just, it's unpersuasive.
It's pretty astounding to me that Lieutenant Governor Forrest would say 1,500 jobs in Wake County, 750 jobs in Charlotte, with an insurance company, 750 jobs in Charlotte with PayPal. Imagine if Dan Forrest could say, I'm going to bring 3,000 jobs to North Carolina. He'd be a hero in the whole state. Now he's saying that doesn't matter.
But with the changes that have happened with lower taxes, with fewer regulations, with smart investments in education and infrastructure, we are seeing that sort of revenue growth and that growth of businesses and those job
creations. 3,000 more jobs.
I guess Chris's point is it could be so much better
Absolutely.
if it weren't for this.
That would be my position. I just think it's taking a blind view not to look down the road and recognize how much better we could do as opposed to sitting here and being happy with where we are.
I got about 30 seconds left in this segment. What have we learned from HB2? How did we get ourselves into this position? And more importantly, what have we learned to prevent this from happening again, Becki?
I think the first thing is let's identify a problem before we try to solve it. And if there's not a problem, then move on.
Don't solve it. Yeah. Howard?
I agree wholeheartedly, and don't act on emotion, act on logic.
Connie?
Take your time when drafting the bill. It could have been drafted a little bit differently that might have been less controversial.
We've learned two things. One is hastily called special sessions and signing bills at night in one day is never a good idea. And the second thing is we need to realize that America has changed. Marriage equality is the law of the land. It makes no sense in the world. So a same-sex couple can get married on Saturday and they could be fired on Monday for putting a picture of their spouse on their desk. And think about that. That's the way we have got to realize that times are changed. A lot of states and cities are protecting gay people from discrimination, and we need to.
Have you signed up to receive our free weekly email newsletter Spin Cycle? It's easy. Just go to our website, ncspin.com, and sign up. And while you're there, you can view the latest NC Spin show, get video footage and perspective pieces not seen anywhere else, and read my weekly column. Get more balanced debate for the Old North State at ncspin.com, NCSpin on YouTube, or on Twitter at NCSpinTweets. Tax cuts. That's the next topic after these messages.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
I hear it all the time. Rising health care costs are squeezing North Carolina families. Deductibles continue to climb, prescription drug prices are skyrocketing, medical bills are unknown until they arrive in the mail, and premiums are increasing by double digits. This is decimating family budgets. We should be focused on education and jobs, not EpiPen cost and medical bill errors. We need quality, affordable, and transparent health care for our families.
North Carolina is a great state with great assets.
Among them are 180,000 state employees.
Our legislators are considering important decisions regarding working conditions,
health insurance,
retirement benefits,
and pay for state employees.
Scenic is the one voice at the table when those decisions are being considered.
Scenic is revitalized and refocused.
A stronger Scenic ensures a more effective voice.
Learn more at www.scenic.org.
We now return to NC Spin.
As our legislature gets down to the serious business of constructing a 2-year state budget due to go into effect July 1st, the halls on Jones Street are filled with talk of tax cuts. That is, when they're not talking about HB 2. Connie, as we said on last week's show, there's a big gap between the House and Senate tax cuts proposals. The Senate wants to cut $1 billion. The House is aiming for half that amount. You spend a lot of time over in the halls there. What do you think we can expect?
Well, the Senate does their budget first this year. They should have something out in about the middle of May. And this week they had a big rollout of their bill in committee and started moving it through their chamber. So what that means is the House has their version, which is substantially less. The Senate has theirs. And this could be an end-of-session negotiation where there's a lot of horse trading, and it may keep us in session a little bit longer because tax cuts have done that to us before.
So, well, and between that and the uncertainty in Washington, the likelihood we have a budget July 1st
is nil to none.
Yeah. All right. Howard, in 2013 and during subsequent years when the legislature has cut taxes, the big criticism has mostly been that the cuts favored corporations and higher income individuals. Leadership has said this year they want to make sure that lower and middle income individuals in North Carolina receive the benefits of tax cuts. So how might this happen? What kind of ways might they do this?
I don't know, but I'm anxious to see because I just finished doing my taxes and they went up instead of going down in terms of the amount I have to pay. I think that they can certainly reduce the rate that people have to pay, but also take a very close look at people who have low incomes and give some relief to people who don't have the income to be able to justify paying higher taxes.
The concept, though, Becki, has been a flat income tax for all individuals. Now, if we're going to give special benefits to lower and middle income individuals, would say to me, we got to cut their taxes even below the flat tax rate, which gets us back into a differentiated kind of rate, does it not?
Well, the way that both the House and the Senate plans have looked at this, so I think this will be something that we'll see move forward in the final budget, is to increase the standard deduction to take care of those low-income people. Or it benefits everybody, but particularly low-income people. So as you increase that zero tax bracket, if you will, that group of income that you pay no taxes at all, they've continued to increase that. So it gives that big tax break to those lower income earners, and that's how they're addressing that. And both the Senate and House plans this year have that
raising
standard,
the threshold for the minimum level. But
right.
Chris, recently the lawmakers went through this process of lowering income taxes, but then they tacked on sales tax increases, which you've said on this show ended up by disproportionately affecting and disadvantaging lower to middle income taxpayers. You expect to see sales tax increases?
Well, I'm not sure they're going to do it this year, but they certainly in the last couple of years have expanded the sales tax to things like car repair, which disproportionately hurts people who don't have a lot of money, who buy older cars and who can at least afford it. One of the things I find fascinating is on this show since 2013, we have all, after the 2013 tax cuts, which by the way, Governor McCrory said was going to be revenue neutral, which weren't. And now every year we say, well, they should probably let those tax cuts take effect before they cut taxes anymore. And yet every year they've cut taxes. If they pass a Senate plan, it'll be $3 billion worth of tax cuts. And remember, we're 44th in per pupil expenditures. We're 50th in principal pay. We're lower teacher pay than every state that borders North Carolina. We got 20,000 kids on a waiting list. I could go on and on. When are we going to start investing?
I need to get to another question. Connie, these tax cuts are obviously going to affect the income side of the ledger in doing the budget. Leadership in both houses say that even with the tax cuts, there should be enough to give pay increases to teachers and state employees, cost of living adjustments to retirees. We should have money for the state rainy day fund, and at the same time, take care of enrollment increases, health care cost increases. How are they going to make all the math add up here?
Well, and this is back to the economic theory of the tax cuts. I know Chris was slamming them for the tax cuts, and I can promise you the Senate and House Republicans would stand up and salute for that. And what they believe they're seeing, and the numbers are proving that here, is there's substantial growth in revenues to do both. When you cut taxes, it increases jobs, it increases economic activity in North Carolina, and you have more money for teacher pay raises.
That's their song, and they're sticking
That's right.
with it.
But it is proven to be true in North Carolina. And it's not just the tax cuts, it's also regulatory reform, it's smart investments in infrastructure and public education and public safety. But the other piece of it is, as you cut taxes, you cut government spending, and you cut it smart, and you set priorities, and then you put more money back into the economy for people to invest the way they want to, invest in businesses, create jobs, those kind of things.
If you grimaced any more, your face would break.
It's shocking to me that we have a lot of other states in the United States who are also doing very well, who aren't 44th in per pupil expenditure, who don't have the worst principal pay in America, who don't have kids who are waiting lists for pre-K that we all agree helps them. We can cut some taxes. We've cut a lot of taxes, $3 billion. And by the way, millionaires will get $20,000 a year. $20,000 a year if we go total in tax cuts.
All right, in the time left, I want to go around the table. We've said there's a $500 million proposal, $1 billion proposal. It's probably going to meet somewhere in the middle. Howard, what's your guesstimate of what the final tax cut might amount to?
About $600,000.
All right. Becki?
Probably about $600 million, I would guess. But with that, but 500, 600 million, but with that too, I think that we're going to see a reduction in government. We're going to see a budget that comes in at or under the growth of population and inflation.
Chris?
I think it probably will be around $600 million, and will continue to lag behind in our education spending.
This is getting to be a slam dunk, Connie. Are you going to agree with $600 million?
I'm not going to disagree with them. I'm going to agree.
I'm glad you agree with me.
That's the only time.
All right, we're going to break, and after we come back, we're going to talk about building new schools.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
The healthcare landscape is filled with questions and uncertainties of changes that are coming. In these times of change, there's one thing you can trust. You can trust your family physician to work for you, not only in treating sickness and disease, but also your overall health. Regardless of how healthcare might change, the men and women of the North Carolina Academy of Family Physicians pledge to work upholding your trust. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisors.
12,000 North Carolina veterans are uninsured with no options to buy health insurance. They fought for us. Now let's fight for them. Let's create a North Carolina solution for covering the uninsured.
To learn more, visit careforcarolina.com.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
We now return to NC Spin.
We've talked frequently on this show about the needs to repair and replace North Carolina's infrastructure. Second to roads and highways, that need is possibly greatest with our public schools. It's estimated some $8 billion in school construction funds will be needed by 2022. And the North Carolina School Boards Association, along with the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, has asked the legislature to put a $1.9 billion school bond referendum on the ballot for November 2018. Citing a recent study on debt affordability by the Treasurer's Office, they say our state can use our AAA credit rating to borrow money at the lowest cost without endangering our credit capacity. Howard Lee, as former chair of the State Board of Education, you've said on this show about the need for new schools. Two questions. Will the legislature look favorably on this recommendation? And if so, will the voters approve such a bond package?
I don't have any basis for making this determination, but I feel very confident that the legislature is aware that we have some really bad third world schools that our students are attending, especially in the rural areas. I have more confidence that the House will look more favorably upon passing such legislation, but I'm not sure about the Senate. I would also hope while they're doing that, they would go back and revisit the lottery and put those construction funds back in place.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that because
so
that is a funding source possibly for some of this. Connie, the school construction is a big problem in all 100 counties. In urban counties and fast-growing counties, you got a situation where the enrollments are growing at a rate that they can't keep up with facilities. In rural counties, they don't have the tax base to be able to afford to fund new schools. How do you fairly balance between urban and rural counties in allocating these bond funds?
Well, that's part of the negotiation and drafting of the bill. And typically there is a weighting of the formula that helps those rural communities that
in the past, we've had so much power that was located in rural areas of the state. It's not there anymore, the powerhouse.
I still believe that there's a great sensitivity to the needs of those rural communities, and I anticipate you will definitely see that again in this type of legislation.
Becki, one option that has been put forward is that the counties that don't currently have a transit tax, which is some 94 counties, would be able to increase their sales taxes by 1/4 cent so as to help fund and pay for construction themselves. What do you think of this idea?
Well, I think if it's a referendum for the voters, that's one thing. I think if it's a mandate from the state, then I don't think that's such a good idea. But one thing that I think, we kind of need to step back from this, there are a lot of assumptions involved in this conversation. And one is, I think we need to look at those county budgets, see where they're spending their money. That all those budgets should be transparent. That is the county's responsibility. And let's make sure that the money that's going to the county, that the revenue that they are collecting is prioritized in such a way so that school construction as it's needed is put into those areas rather than diverted for other things. I mean, that seems to me to be a good starting point.
Chris, Howard mentioned the business about lottery proceeds, and a portion of that was intended to go for school constructions, but obviously it's not enough to fund $8 billion worth of needs over the next few years. On top of all of that, Governor Cooper says what he wants to do is use lottery proceeds to offer free community college tuition to students in North Carolina. What's your take on the utilization of these lotteries?
And the Senate leaders want to use lottery money to pay for principal pay as well. They had a press conference about that. Look, I think the lottery is a terrible idea, but if we're going to have it, I've always thought the one thing it should pay for is one-time expenses, and there's nothing more one-time than school construction. I wondered if there's a way to use dedicated lottery revenue to pay the debt service on the bond, for example, and we wouldn't have to cut anything else or raise any other taxes. I don't think we need to be increasing lottery advertising. I think we need to, and the legislature in recent years has started shifting lottery funds to replace all sorts of state funds in various programs. We need to stop doing that. I would be in favor of most lottery funds going for one-time things like school construction.
It is an education lottery. After these messages, we'll ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
Our state has more than 300,000 with no options for health insurance. 63% are in working families, one illness away from disaster. Let's create a North Carolina solution for covering the uninsured.
To learn more, visit careforcarolina.com.
North Carolina is a great state with great assets.
Among them are 180,000 state employees. Our legislators are considering important decisions regarding working conditions,
health insurance,
retirement benefits,
and pay for state employees.
Scenic is the one voice at the table when those decisions are being considered.
Scenic is revitalized and refocused.
A stronger Scenic ensures a more effective voice.
Learn more at www.scenic.org.
We now return to NC Spin.
Now we come to the part of the show everybody enjoys watching. We ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Becki Gray, I'll start with you.
Well, you may know that charter schools have had great success in North Carolina, but what we're seeing this session is expansion of charter schools, expansion of the enrollment. So those great charter schools that are succeeding, we're seeing some ideas to let that enrollment grow, seeing even some ideas of towns being able to start charter schools, maybe even having sort of villages of charter schools where they're all together and can really share resources and share some of those great ideas. Great time, really exciting for charter schools.
Howard Lee, tell us something we don't know.
40 years ago, we established something called the Mountains to the Sea Trail, and on the 25th, I was in the beautiful city of Elkin celebrating what positive impact that trail has had on that community. And the 1,100 miles now is open and people are walking.
I know that's a cause dear to your heart.
Absolutely.
Connie Wilson, tell us something we don't know.
Senator Ralph Heiss has filed a bill that will make families and help children across the state. And it is a bill that would give every child in North Carolina books from the age they're 0 to 5 every month through the Dolly Parton Imagination Library.
Interesting. Chris Fitzsimon.
Well, a conservative state Senate with a Republican supermajority voted this past Monday night to expand Medicaid. The House has already done it. The problem is it was in Kansas, not in North Carolina. One of the most conservative states in the country. Despite the chaos in Washington, a conservative Republican state wants to expand Medicaid. It's a shame we're not following their lead.
Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read my weekly column, be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And join us next week when we'll have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.